Pick your bags and leave, you low-class gold digger. This mansion is not your level. That's what the woman said, bold, loud, and full of pride, as she pointed to the 5 designer suitcases lined up outside the gate. She didn't know she was speaking to the real owner. She didn't know the house she was defending didn't belong to her son. It belonged to the woman she just kicked out. And what happened next left both mother and son speechless. Before we continue, like, share, and subscribe if you love true poetic justice and folktale stories that hit where it hurts. Now, let's dive into this unforgettable tale. The sun was just beginning to dip when Bianca's car turned into the quiet street of Regal Grove Estate. She exhaled softly, fingers loosening from the steering wheel. Another long day at the firm. Another round of meetings, client briefs, and back-to-back pitches. But it was worth it. Her architectural designs were winning contracts across the country. Success was finally settling in, and quietly, just the way she liked it. She turned into the mansion's driveway, ready to exhale fully. But what she saw made her foot slam the brake. 5 designer suitcases, hers, lined up neatly at the gate. No welcome, no explanation, just silent rejection, zippered in leather. She blinked, confused. Her brow furrowed. Maybe there'd been a mix-up, a security misunderstanding? But as she opened the car door and stepped out, heels clicking softly on the pavement, a voice cut through the air. There she is, the woman sneered. The gold digger in high heels. Bianca turned. Standing just inside the open gate, hands folded and face twisted in satisfaction, was Mrs. Morgan, her mother-in-law. She hadn't even changed out of her church outfit. Pearls on her neck, judgment in her eyes. I don't know what kind of charm you used on my son, she continued, but it ends today. Bianca stood still. What is this about? Mrs. Morgan scoffed. Don't play dumb. Marcus deserves better. You're just a dressed-up servant who got lucky. Bianca's lips parted, but nothing came out. Take your bags and leave this mansion. You don't belong in our family. You don't belong in his house. Still calm, Bianca took one slow step forward. This house, she said gently. What did you just call it? My son's, Mrs. Morgan said with her chin high. Marcus's house. Now get out before I call security. Bianca glanced at the familiar front door, the pillars she designed herself, the brass number plate she handpicked. And then she smiled. Mrs. Morgan took a firm step forward, placing herself squarely between Bianca and the gate. I said don't come closer, she snapped, raising her palm like a traffic warden. This isn't a debate. You're not walking into that house. Bianca remained poised. You're seriously blocking me from my own home? Mrs. Morgan laughed, sharp and full of venom. Your home? Please. This estate doesn't even let people like you in unless they're wearing uniforms and pushing lawnmowers. Bianca's smile faded. People like me? You know exactly what I mean, she hissed, scanning Bianca from head to toe. Your accent might be polished now, but I know your type. Women who hide struggle behind makeup and expensive bags. You snuck your way into my son's life. Now take your little suitcases and sneak right back out. Bianca's fingers curled slightly at her side, but she didn't raise her voice. She never did. You don't even know me, she said. Oh, I know enough, Mrs. Morgan said, arms folded. You never brought anything to this marriage but your body and your ambition. And now you want to enjoy the comfort my son built. Bianca raised an eyebrow. Comfort he built. Yes, she shouted. This mansion, this life, it's Marcus's. You're just a guest here. A tolerated mistake. And I'm done watching you embarrass our family name. She pointed to the luggage again. Take your things and go before Marcus gets back. I told him I'd handle it like a lady. But if you want public disgrace, I can call the neighbors. Bianca stepped closer, eyes locked onto hers. So this is the kind of woman who raised him. Mrs. Morgan's face twitched. Excuse me. The kind that mistakes wealth for worth. The kind that assumes silence means weakness. Mrs. Morgan laughed again, louder this time. Look at you. Acting noble, trying to sound deep. If you really had any power, you'd speak up, you'd. Just then, a car engine approached. Both women turned. Marcus's sleek SUV rolled into the compound. He stepped out casually, adjusting his watch, clearly briefed already by his mother. His eyes flicked to the bags, then to Bianca. Bianca, he said coolly. I don't know what misunderstanding this is, but maybe it's best if you just give everyone space right now. Emotions are high. But she cut him off. With a slow, deliberate motion, she reached into her purse, pulled out a small black remote, and pressed a button. The mansion's front door clicked, then swung open. Bianca didn't look at either of them. She simply said, "Is this how guests are treated in my house?" And with that, she stepped inside. Marcus took a slow step forward, feigning confusion as the front door creaked open behind Bianca. "Wait, how did you do that?" he asked, eyes darting between the remote in her hand and the now unlocked mansion. Bianca turned around in the doorway, cool and composed. "You really want to pretend this is new to you?" He scratched the back of his neck, then let out a nervous chuckle. "Babe, come on. You must have gotten the code somehow. I changed them months ago." Mrs. Morgan chimed in quickly, emboldened by the show. "Exactly. So unless you're into breaking and entering now." "I didn't change the codes," Bianca said sharply, her voice still low but cutting. "Because I never needed to." Marcus stepped forward, trying to keep his tone light. "Okay, let's not do this out here. My mom got a little emotional. I'll talk to her. Let's just go inside and—" Bianca raised a hand. "No, we're doing this now." She stepped fully into the doorway, letting the sunlight hit the marble floor behind her. She stood tall, centered between the two massive pillars of the entrance, like a queen returning to her palace. "I didn't come home to be insulted by your mother on my own porch," she said. "I came home after a long day at my firm, where I worked to pay the mortgage on my property." Marcus stiffened. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that this house, this entire compound, is legally mine. I bought it 2 years before I even met you." Mrs. Morgan blinked. "What?" Bianca didn't even look at her. Her eyes were on Marcus now. "You begged me not to put your name on the deed. Said it would weaken your image. Remember that?" Marcus's lips moved, but no words came out. "You said it would make you look like a man who couldn't build his own empire. So I stayed silent. I let you parade this place as your trophy, let you play the rich husband while I paid the property tax." Mrs. Morgan's mouth hung open. Marcus looked like the floor had just collapsed beneath him. Bianca stepped aside and gestured toward the door. "You said I didn't belong here. But truth is, neither of you do." She took one final look at the bags lined outside the gate and added, "You can take those, by the way. I only brought them to remind you who really packed the weight in this marriage." Then, with grace sharper than rage, Bianca walked inside and closed the door. Behind her, mother and son stood in silence, finally realizing they had just kicked themselves out of her house. 2 years before Marcus ever stepped into her life, Bianca stood on the same property, but the house hadn't been built yet. Just a vast, empty lot fenced with possibility. She wore a white hard hat and black heels, clipboard in hand, as she walked the perimeter with the project manager beside her. The sun beat down on her blazer, but she didn't flinch. She was too busy imagining angles, structures, and skylights. "This will be the 3rd property under your name," the manager had said, half amazed, half curious. "Are you planning to flip it or live in it?" Bianca smiled without looking up. "Neither. I'm going to design it. From foundation to finish. It'll be mine, not to sell, but to rest." Most people who saw Bianca back then underestimated her. She was soft-spoken, too elegant to be taken seriously in a male-dominated industry. But her design spoke louder than she ever needed to. At 29, she had already won 3 national competitions and was quietly building a personal real estate portfolio behind the scenes. She never wore flashy logos, never bragged. But her ideas? They were bold. It took 10 months of planning, 2 architecture interns, and a construction crew who eventually called her boss lady. Not because she asked for the title, but because she earned it. Bianca chose every inch of the layout herself. The Italian marble floors, the skylight in the stairwell, the solar panels hidden neatly on the roof. She didn't just build a house. She carved a sanctuary. And when the mansion was finally finished, with its clean white lines, high arched windows, and hidden garden terrace, she stood at the front door alone, keys in hand. No ribbon-cutting ceremony. No guests. Just her. She walked inside, barefoot on her own tiles, breathing in a home she had imagined long before anyone believed she could own it. She remembered sitting on the living room floor that night, a glass of wine in one hand, the property deed in the other. She whispered to herself, "This is mine. Not just the house, but the peace inside it." And that was the truth she carried quietly, even when years later, someone else moved in and called it his. It was a quiet evening. The living room lights were dimmed, Jazz music hummed from the built-in speakers, and Bianca sat cross-legged on the couch, reading design specs for a museum renovation project. Marcus stepped out of the shower in a robe, sipping wine, his eyes scanning the open-plan space with a satisfied smirk. "You know," he said casually, "every time someone visits, I can see it in their faces. They're impressed." Bianca looked up from her pages. "By what?" He gestured around. "This. The house. The layout. The finishings. Everything." She smiled faintly. "Well, I'd hope so. I spent 11 months designing it." He chuckled, then walked over and sat beside her. "Yeah, but people think I built this. That I bought it." Bianca blinked. "What?" Marcus took another sip, his tone light but pointed. "When the guys from my gym came by last weekend, they assumed it was mine, that I'm the one who paid for it. And honestly, I didn't correct them." She stared at him, waiting. He sighed and leaned in, setting his glass on the coffee table. "Babe, look, I know it's your house. You built it. You paid for it. I respect that. But," she asked quietly. "But I'm a man," he said. "In our culture, in my circles, people expect the man to be the provider. You know how it looks when I tell them my wife owns the house." Bianca tilted her head slightly. "How it looks to who? Strangers?" "To everyone," he said. "Clients. Friends. Even my mom. Especially my mom. You've met her. She already thinks you're too quiet, too polished. If she finds out you bought this place before we even met, she'll never let me hear the end of it." Bianca placed her papers down. "So you want me to lie?" "Not lie," he said quickly. "Just don't correct them. Let people assume what they want. It's just easier that way." She looked at him for a long moment. The man she had let into her sanctuary. The man who had asked to move in just until business picks up. The man who had slowly filled her home with his image but not his gratitude. And she said nothing. Just nodded once. And from that day forward, she let Marcus take the credit. Not because she was weak, but because she thought protecting his pride meant protecting the peace. She didn't realize it was the beginning of erasing herself in her own house. Marcus followed her a few steps in, trying to lower his voice. "Look, you're making my mother uncomfortable. You could have just told me you were coming home early." She raised a brow. "To my home." He winced. "Can we not use that language?" "What language?" "Truth." Mrs. Morgan stayed at the doorway, stunned, her heels no longer steady on the ground she'd once claimed with arrogance. "Marcus, is she saying she owns this place?" Bianca walked to the kitchen island, grabbed a white envelope, and handed it to Marcus without looking at him. He opened it. Property deed. Title. Paid in full. Under her name. Every page. Every signature. Silence filled the room like fog. Bianca set her purse down on the counter. "You both asked me to leave, but I won't be the one walking out today." Then she walked to the center of the living room, the place she'd once sat cross-legged on the floor with a glass of wine, dreaming of peace, and stood tall. Mrs. Morgan backed up slowly, her voice shaking. "Marcus, did you lie to me?" But Marcus had no answer, only shame. And Bianca? She simply turned, walked upstairs, and left them standing in the grand foyer of a house they never owned and no longer belonged in. Mrs. Morgan stood awkwardly in the middle of the living room, her arms folded tightly across her chest, lips pressed into a thin line. She kept darting looks at Marcus, as if waiting for him to fix the situation, to say it was all a joke, to take back the power Bianca had just claimed with nothing but a remote and a handful of paperwork. "Marcus," she snapped at last, "you told me this was your house. You said you bought it, that you had it built with your own money." He rubbed his temples. "Mom, just lower your voice." "Don't tell me to lower my voice," she barked. I just embarrassed myself in front of her like a fool. You let me throw out the owner of the house. What were you thinking?" Bianca's footsteps echoed from the top of the stairs. She descended slowly, changed out of her work heels, now in flats and a black silk robe. At peace, like a queen ready to give her final ruling. "I'd like you both to stay for a moment," she said calmly. Mrs. Morgan scoffed. "Why? So you can humiliate us even more." "No," Bianca replied, picking up her phone. "So I can clarify a few things with professional witnesses." Marcus stiffened. "Bianca, what do you mean?" She tapped a button and headed to the door. Moments later, the doorbell rang. Twice. Bianca opened it, and two sharply dressed individuals stepped inside. A man with a leather briefcase and a woman holding a rolled-up document tube. Bianca addressed them without formality. "Mr. Osei, thank you for coming on short notice." And you as well, Madison. The man nodded. Always a pleasure, Mrs. Taylor. Bianca turned to Marcus and his mother. This is Mr. Osei, the lawyer who handled the property title. And this is Madison Crane, the real estate agent who sold me this home 3 years ago. Mrs. Morgan's eyes widened. 3 years. Bianca nodded. Before I even met your son. Marcus looked trapped. Bianca, what's the point of this? The point, she said, stepping aside so both professionals could speak, is to put the truth on record. Not just between us, but with witnesses. Mr. Osei stepped forward, pulling out a manila folder. The property, located at 21 Whitestone Crescent, is fully owned by Mrs. Bianca Taylor. No mortgage remains. No co-signatory. No joint ownership. He held up the documents for both Marcus and Mrs. Morgan to see. It was purchased outright in her name, paid in full through her personal architect firm's corporate account. Madison added, and I personally handled the interior walkthrough and closing. Her taste is what sold the house, not the price. She designed every inch. Mrs. Morgan sat down, slowly, quiet for the first time. Marcus's face turned pale. You really brought them here? Yes, Bianca said. Because I realized something. Sometimes the loudest people need receipts, more than explanations. She walked to the coffee table, placed the folder down beside the untouched tea set Mrs. Morgan had earlier refused to drink from, and folded her arms. You accuse me of being a gold digger. She looked directly at Mrs. Morgan. But the truth is, the only person digging was your son, into my peace, my pockets, and my silence. The coffee table had never looked more intimidating. Page after page was now laid out in neat rows, deeds, payment receipts, land surveys, and legal acknowledgments, all stamped, signed, and filed under one name, Bianca Taylor. The silence in the living room was thick. Even the air seemed to pause. Marcus stared down at the papers like they were written in another language. But they weren't. He knew exactly what they said, what they meant, and worst of all, he knew they were real. Mr. Osei stood patiently, hands clasped behind his back. Madison, the real estate agent, stood with professional poise, as if this were just another day of proving a point with receipts. Bianca? She sat back on the edge of the armrest, quiet, composed, letting the papers speak for her. Mrs. Morgan was the first to break the silence. She leaned forward slowly, picking up the title document like it might burn her fingertips. She turned it over, eyes scanning frantically for her son's name. Any sign that this was a misunderstanding? Nothing. Her lips trembled. Marcus. He didn't answer. Marcus, she snapped louder. You told me this house was yours. That you bought it. That you were building an empire. He rubbed his forehead, eyes locked on the floor. I didn't think it mattered. I thought it was just paperwork. Bianca raised an eyebrow. Paperwork. You said you were okay with it, he shouted suddenly, voice cracking. You told me it was fine, that I could protect my image, that it didn't matter who was on the deed. I said I'd stay quiet, Bianca replied coldly. Not that I'd erase myself. He stood up abruptly and began pacing. Why are you doing this now? Why humiliate me like this in front of my mother? You know how this looks. How it looks? Bianca echoed, rising to her feet. You let her throw my bags out in the street. You stood there while she called me a gold digger. And not once did you correct her. You watched it happen. Marcus's mouth opened, then shut. He had no defense. Bianca continued, her voice now steady with emotion. You took my silence as permission, my grace as weakness, and my love as a free ride. Mr. Osei calmly began gathering the documents back into the folder. I think we've provided enough clarity, he said, glancing between them. There's no legal ambiguity. The house belongs solely to Mrs. Taylor. Madison nodded, offering a professional smile to Bianca. Always a pleasure to serve a client with class. With that, both witnesses took their leave. The front door shut quietly behind them. And in the living room, Marcus stood surrounded by truth he couldn't spin and a woman he could no longer control. Bianca walked past him and retrieved her remote from the kitchen counter. She tapped it once. The gate outside locked with a firm beep. I opened this house to you with love, she said softly. But if you think I'll keep the door open for lies and cowardice, then you never knew me at all. Bianca stood in the center of the living room like a statue carved from resolve. Her arms were no longer crossed. Her tone was no longer cautious. She wasn't defending herself. She wasn't explaining. She was done. Marcus stood a few feet away, lips parted but speechless. His mother sat on the edge of the couch, clutching her purse like it was a life vest. Neither of them moved. Let me be clear, Bianca said, her voice level. This isn't about papers. This isn't about a gate code or a deed. It's about something much deeper. She turned her eyes on Marcus. You had every chance to speak up. When your mother insulted me, you stayed silent. When I was locked out of my own home, you played dumb. You let me be humiliated for the sake of your image. He swallowed hard. I panicked. No, she replied sharply. You calculated. He tried again. Bianca, it's not what it looks like. We can fix this. You let her call me a gold digger, she cut in. You let her stand at my gate, point at my bags, and tell me I didn't belong here. Mrs. Morgan shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know. You didn't care to know, Bianca interrupted, her voice calm but cutting. You walked into this house with your nose in the air, assuming your son earned it. But not once did you stop to ask how it was built. Mrs. Morgan's mouth opened, but Bianca raised a hand. I don't need apologies. I don't want explanations. What I want is space. She looked between the two of them. So here's how this will go. She walked to the grand entryway, tapped the security panel, and opened the gate remotely once again. The same gate they had once closed in her face. You have 10 minutes to gather your things, she said, turning back. And then I want you both out of my house. Marcus's face went pale. You're serious? I've never been clearer in my life. You're throwing us out? Just like that. Bianca tilted her head. No, Marcus. You threw yourselves out. The moment you thought I had no value without a name on your guest list. Mrs. Morgan stood shakily, clutching her pearls. Bianca, wait. I wish you both well, Bianca said softly. But you'll wish harder that you had respected the woman who gave you everything and asked for nothing in return. Marcus stared at her, heart pounding. You can't do this. I already did. She turned and walked toward the staircase, each step echoing with finality. Behind her, the grand double doors opened, not with rage, not with noise, but with power that didn't need to shout. Bianca didn't look back. She didn't need to. Because when you own the house, you don't explain your exit. You make theirs. It was nearly midnight. The mansion was still, bathed in the soft amber glow of recessed lighting. Bianca sat at her desk in the home office, quietly reviewing blueprints for a beachfront resort project due in 2 weeks. Her fingers moved effortlessly, but her mind wasn't fully there. A soft knock echoed at the door. Not firm, not entitled, just hesitant. She looked up. Bianca. Marcus's voice came through, softer than she'd heard in months. Can I talk to you? She paused, then turned back to her blueprint. The door opened slowly, and he stepped in wearing sweatpants and a crumpled t-shirt. A far cry from the suits he used to wear when pretending to be the man of the house. She didn't speak. He lingered by the doorway. I needed to say something before I leave tomorrow. She kept her eyes on the paper. Then say it. He exhaled, took a step in. I messed up. She looked up, unimpressed. That's an understatement. I let my pride ruin things. I should have spoken up when Mom started attacking you. I should have corrected her, told the truth. But you didn't. I know, he said quickly. And I'm not making excuses. I was insecure, okay? I've never been with a woman who had more than me. It made me feel like less of a man. She folded her arms. So you let her call me a gold digger? You let me be locked out of a house I designed and paid for, because your ego couldn't handle my success. I didn't think it would go that far, he said. I thought I could control it. Her eyes narrowed. And that's the problem, Marcus. You've always needed to control something, even if it meant shrinking me. He looked down, ashamed, then stepped closer. But I don't want to lose you, B. I miss us. I miss the way you used to look at me, like I was worth something. You were, she said, until you proved otherwise. He ran a hand through his hair, desperate. Please, just give me a chance to make it right. I'll move out if you want space. I'll go to therapy. I'll tell the world the truth if that's what it takes. Bianca studied him for a long moment, then spoke slowly. You didn't just betray me, Marcus. You betrayed everything I gave you. My home, my trust, my silence. You weaponized it all, and now you want to fix it. I just want a second chance, he whispered. She stood, walked over to him, looked him in the eye. You had won. It came with keys, respect, and love. You left it all at the gate with my bags. He blinked back tears. So that's it. No, she said softly. You ended it. I'm just finishing what you started. She walked past him without another word, leaving Marcus standing in the one room of the house he once ruled, now just a guest in the life he never deserved. The morning light crept through the tall windows of the kitchen, casting golden stripes across the marble floor. Bianca stood by the island, quietly stirring her tea. She didn't flinch when Marcus entered behind her, barefoot, rumpled, and looking like he hadn't slept. He approached slowly. "I know you're still upset," he began. She didn't turn around. "I'm not upset anymore, Marcus." He blinked, confused by her calm. "I'm past that." She finally turned to face him, her eyes steady. "But I haven't forgotten. So before you ask again for forgiveness, let me remind you of what exactly you're asking me to forgive." He nodded slowly, chest tight. "Okay." Bianca set the spoon down and walked to the opposite side of the island, now staring at him across the same counter where they once shared morning jokes and late-night snacks. "You remember your birthday dinner last year?" she asked. "The one your mother organized?" He nodded. "She made a toast and introduced me to the table as the beautiful little lady who got lucky. Everyone laughed, including you." He opened his mouth, but she held up a finger. "I sat there smiling while your mother downplayed my career in front of a room full of executives I had actually worked with. You never said a word." He looked down. Bianca continued, voice still calm. "Remember when she came to visit last Christmas and you let her rearrange the entire kitchen? Told her it was fine when she said, 'This setup doesn't feel like a real wife's touch?'" He looked up. "Bianca, I didn't want to cause a scene. You let me be the scene," she said. He shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't think it was that deep." "Of course not," she said. "Because it wasn't your name they mocked. Not your silence they measured. It was mine." She walked around the island now, each step soft but deliberate. "There's more," she said. "Do you remember when we attended that gala, and someone called me your plus one? And you didn't correct them?" "I didn't want to embarrass the guy," he muttered. "But you let him erase me." Her words landed heavier than any raised voice. "You didn't just let people disrespect me, Marcus," she said, eyes shining. "You gave them the room. You opened the door and stood back." He looked at her then, really looked. Not at the woman he married, but at the woman he'd underestimated, muted, and misrepresented for years. "I never meant." "You never stopped it," she said. Silence fell between them. Bianca picked up her tea, took one final sip, and placed the cup down gently. "You want forgiveness," she said. "But I gave you 10 years of silence, loyalty, and love, and all you gave me was a front-row seat to my own belittlement." Marcus said nothing. There was nothing left to say. She walked away from him again, not in anger, but in freedom. And this time, he didn't follow. Because some apologies come too late. And some women no longer stay just to hear them. The clock ticked past 10 a.m., and the air in the living room was still. Bianca sat in her favorite armchair by the window, dressed in a crisp cream blouse and tailored trousers. Her laptop was closed. Her mind made up. She heard Marcus's footsteps approaching before she saw him. Slower than usual. Almost reluctant, like a man walking towards something he already knew he couldn't change. He entered the room without a word and stopped a few feet away from her. His face was pale, his voice tired. "I guess this is where you tell me to pack." Bianca didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached for the slim, white envelope resting on the glass table beside her. She stood and walked over to him. Her heels barely made a sound, but the moment still thundered. She held the envelope out, steady and emotionless. He took it hesitantly and opened it. His eyes scanned the contents, once, twice, and then froze. Eviction notice. Legal. Binding. Prepared by her lawyer. Signed by her. 30 days to vacate. Effective immediately. He looked up, voice shaky. You really filed this?" Bianca nodded once. "Yesterday. I thought we were just arguing. I thought this was about your pride, or making a point. I didn't think." "No," she said calmly. "That's the problem, Marcus. You never think. Not about the consequences. Not about the people you trample trying to keep up appearances." He stepped closer. "But we're married. And this house," she replied, "was never in your name. Which means you are a tenant. And I am the landlord." He stared at her like he didn't recognize the woman standing before him. The one who once waited for him to come home, who once whispered encouragement into his failures. She was still standing in the same house. But she was no longer standing with him. "You don't want to work this out?" he asked, voice hollow. Bianca shook her head. "I wanted a husband who would protect me, honor me, defend me when it counted." She stepped back. Instead, I got someone who weaponized my success and called it insecurity. Marcus folded the paper, but his hands trembled. You're not even angry. I'm not, she said softly. Anger would mean I still care enough to fight. But I'm past that. He turned away slowly, walking toward the staircase. Not to go upstairs, but because he didn't know where else to go. Bianca called after him gently. You'll find a list of moving companies in the envelope. I've already scheduled 3 options. Choose whichever you prefer. You have 30 days, but I'd recommend you don't take 31. He paused, back still turned. Then he nodded once, and kept walking. As he disappeared around the corner, Bianca looked out the window, the morning sun casting long shadows across the lawn. And for the first time in years, the house finally felt like it belonged to her again. Not because she forced anyone out, but because she finally stopped letting people stay who never truly came in with respect. 3 days had passed since the eviction notice. The mansion remained quiet, calm, untouched by the drama that once echoed through its walls. But at exactly 9:12 a.m., the peace outside was interrupted by the low hum of a navy blue sedan pulling up to the gate. Inside sat Mrs. Morgan, dressed in her most polished attire, a lavender blouse, pearl earrings, and a stiff smile that didn't reach her eyes. On the seat beside her was a neatly wrapped gift basket, gourmet cookies, a handwritten card, and a box of imported tea. She lowered the window and waved at the security post like she was greeting an old friend. Good morning, she chirped. I'm here to see Bianca. I brought a little peace offering. The security guard, a tall, no-nonsense man named Samuel, stepped out of the booth and approached her window. Name, please. She blinked. You know who I am. I'm Marcus's mother, Mrs. Morgan. Samuel checked the tablet in his hand, then looked up without blinking. I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not on the approved guest list. Mrs. Morgan let out a forced laugh. There must be a mistake. I'm family. He remained silent. She tried again, voice still sugary. Can you just call Bianca and tell her I'm here? Tell her I brought something. She'll let me in. Samuel tapped a few buttons, then turned the screen so she could see. A list of restricted entries appeared, and her name was at the top. Morgan, Elizabeth, blocked, no access. Her smile faltered. She blocked me. I don't make the rules, ma'am, Samuel said politely. I just follow them. Mrs. Morgan's hands tightened on the wheel. Look, I know things got tense the other day. I just want to apologize. She misunderstood me. Samuel tilted his head. Ma'am, I watched the security footage. She didn't misunderstand. She remembered. Mrs. Morgan's face went pale. Behind her, a delivery truck honked impatiently, waiting to access the gate. Samuel stepped back, motioning for her to reverse. She didn't move right away, just stared at the house in the distance. The gates that once opened so easily now sealed shut. After a long pause, she reached over, picked up the gift basket, and placed it gently on the dashboard. Then she rolled the window back up, and slowly, she drove away, realizing the house she once tried to throw someone out of wouldn't even let her back in to say sorry. The building was modest, 3 stories high, no gate, no marble floors, no valet parking. Just a cracked sidewalk, faded bricks, and an elevator that groaned before it moved. Marcus stood in front of Unit 2B, a key in one hand and a half-taped box in the other. The hallway smelled like old carpet and detergent. Someone was arguing through the wall across the hall. A dog barked faintly in the distance. This wasn't a mansion. This was reality. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was small, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchenette with flickering fluorescent lights. Dust floated in the air, untouched and unbothered. The only furniture so far was a second-hand couch, a folding table, and a lamp with no shade. Cardboard boxes lined the wall, most labeled in black marker. Clothes. Books. Kitchen, basic. He dropped the box he was holding and let out a long breath, shoulders sagging. His phone buzzed on the counter, a group chat from his old gym buddies. A few unread messages. He didn't open them. He hadn't heard from them since the truth came out. Since the house he bragged about was revealed to never be his. Since the woman he tried to silence had finally spoken. Marcus moved slowly through the room, unpacking in silence. He set a few plates in the empty cabinets, laid out 2 shirts in the narrow closet. But nothing filled the space. Not really. He walked over to the window and looked out. No city skyline. No driveway. Just power lines and the back of a laundromat. This was what was left after the image cracked. He turned and looked around the apartment again, not with anger, but with something else. Regret. Deep. Heavy. Lingering. On the edge of a box marked personal, he noticed a picture frame poking out. He pulled it free. It was a photo of him and Bianca, taken in the early days. Back when she smiled without reservation. Back when her eyes held light around him. Before silence cost him everything. He stared at it for a moment, then gently set it face down in the box. He sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, surrounded by things, and yet completely alone. There were no gate codes here. No security staff. No grand foyer. Just a man, his boxes, and the sound of a ceiling fan clicking out of rhythm. The television glowed in the corner of Marcus's apartment. He wasn't even watching at first, just lying on the couch, half asleep, the remote dangling loosely in his hand. But then he heard her name. And now, to close this year's Women in Property and Power Conference, please welcome architect and real estate mogul, Bianca West. Marcus sat up. The channel was on a local business network. The screen showed a packed hotel ballroom, elegant, golden lit, filled with hundreds of women in professional attire, clapping as Bianca walked onto the stage. She wore a fitted white suit with gold accents. Confident, poised, hair swept up, smile calm but commanding. No bitterness. No trace of the woman who once sat at the same dinner table, silenced by his mother's insults. This Bianca didn't need anyone's permission to speak. She began. There was a time when I thought owning a house meant owning peace. I was wrong. Because no house, no matter how big, feels like home if you're shrinking inside it. The crowd went still, listening. But then I remembered, I've built that house. I earned every square inch of it. And one day, I decided I'd stop apologizing for the keys I carried. Applause erupted. Marcus stared, silent. The sound of their clapping made his one-bedroom feel even smaller. The camera panned across the crowd. Women were nodding, some wiping tears, taking notes. Bianca continued. This is more than real estate. It's about worth. If you let others define your space, they'll box you into corners they couldn't even build. So today, I challenge every woman in this room. She raised her hand, palm open. Know your worth. And own your space. Standing ovation. The announcer's voice came in over the feed. Bianca West, once known for her quiet designs, now making noise in boardrooms and breaking ground across 5 cities. Marcus muted the TV. His reflection stared back at him in the dark screen. For the first time, he realized. Bianca hadn't changed overnight. She'd always been this woman. He just never saw it. And now, she wasn't just walking through the doors people once shut in her face. She was the one building them, and choosing who got to enter. The street was quiet that evening. The kind of golden dusk that made even shadows seem soft. Marcus drove slowly, his hands tight on the wheel. Beside him, Mrs. Morgan sat stiffly, arms folded, her lips tight with unspoken words. They didn't speak much these days. Not since the truth came out. Not since the mansion they used to boast about became a fortress they could only look at from a distance. As they turned the corner onto Elmsworth Avenue, there it was. The mansion, lit from within, glowing against the evening sky like a silent monument. The driveway was freshly paved, the garden alive with color. There were guests arriving, well-dressed, cheerful, laughing as they stepped through the gates that once welcomed them too. Marcus parked a few houses away and stared. Mrs. Morgan leaned forward, squinting. Bianca stepped out from the grand front doors. She wore a tailored emerald dress, her hair in a regal updo, her presence commanding yet graceful. She smiled and greeted a guest, then waved toward the security staff at the gate. They nodded, professional, protective. Mrs. Morgan gasped softly. Is that her? Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't. His heart beat in a strange rhythm. Part anger, part sorrow, mostly shame. He had stood in that house and believed he ruled it. Believed his silence was strength and his pride was protection. But this was hers. And it always had been. Bianca turned slightly. For a moment it looked as though she saw them. But she didn't react. No wave. No glare. No emotion. Just calm. She turned back to her guests, smiling as they entered. And the gates slowly closed behind her. Mrs. Morgan finally broke the silence. Maybe we judged her too quickly. Marcus looked at her. But there was nothing left to say. Words were a luxury they no longer owned. They sat there for a moment longer, watching the lights shimmer through the tall windows. windows they used to pass through without thinking. Now, they could only sit on the outside, looking in, not just at the house, but at the life that had outgrown them. The silence was heavy, not bitter, just final. He put the car in drive and slowly pulled away. They tried to throw her out of her own house because they mistook her silence for weakness. But the deed was never in their name, and neither was the future. They mocked her silence, called her ordinary, laughed behind her back when she didn't flaunt her success, when she smiled through insults, when she chose peace over pride. They thought the quiet ones are weak. They thought the woman who doesn't shout, doesn't fight, doesn't boast, must be beneath them. But they forgot something. Power doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes, it walks in on heels, sets its keys on the table, and builds empires behind closed doors. Bianca never had to scream to prove herself. She just had to let the truth speak. And when it did, the same people who tried to push her out found themselves standing behind gates they could no longer open. She didn't get revenge. She didn't curse them or drag them down. She simply rose, quietly, completely, and without looking back. Because some victories aren't loud. Some victories are final. They tried to throw her out of her own house because they mistook her silence for weakness. But the deed was never in their name, and neither was the future. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe real power doesn't announce itself. It simply opens the door and lets silence speak for itself.